I'm going to get started with you, Partha. You and I have recently discussed a lot of your plans for the cloud business unit over the coming year. There's a lot of exciting things you're looking to do. I think AI is obviously the buzzword of today, but a very useful and indeed colorful example you gave was how you intend to embed the so-called anti-fragility of the human immune system into your products and services. Can you give our audience a bit more context on what that means and any progress you've made in that respect?
Sure. First of all, thanks, James, for having us here. And welcome to the session. I hope you're having a good MWC. So, the concept of anti fragility is kind of interesting because if you think about how systems are built, they're built for resiliency. So, when something fails, you essentially build systems that monitor components. And if they fail, then you essentially build systems to restore that. But the human body works, or actually any organism, right? It works in a very different way. It works on this concept of anti-fragility, which essentially means that when it is subjected to, um, pain, or it's subjected to external, stresses, it actually strengthens the body. It's not about building systems that recover from failure. It's about building a system that actually gets better with failure, right? So that's the general concept of anti-fragility. And now the idea is, how do you take something like that and then build it into a software system? And my business unit essentially builds cloud that the Rakuten mobile software runs on, or the mobile network runs on, and the bunch of other customers that essentially users for telco as well as enterprises. So the idea is, how do you take that concept and embed that into cloud? And one of the things that we have been doing is we have built this. The first thing to do for that is for essentially capture all the data points to identify where the stresses are to the cloud, right? So we have built this thing called Cloud Pulse, which basically is a tool that captures all this data. And once it captures all this data, it essentially builds a model that identifies when is the failure happening, what is the component that's getting failed, and then it correlates it with what are the things that are essentially triggering this failure. So once you have that baseline understanding, the software then essentially goes one step further, which is trying to figure out how to avoid that, right? So that's the starting point. But the real game changer is what's really happening with deep learning and things like language models and all that. So how do you make that connection? So one of the unique things that large language models has given us is the ability to generate code at runtime, if you will. You can actually generate code on a running system. It's not like the vendor generates codes and ships a binary that it runs on the customer's environment, but you can actually generate code in runtime. So once you gather this layer that captures all these failures, you build a system that can react to these failures. You take it one step further, and then you generate code that will ensure that the system now gets strengthened based on the failures that it is seeing. That is the concept of anti-fragility that you're bringing into the cloud that we have built. And of course, the benefits are obvious, right? It's not just about writing resilient systems. It's also writing systems that, never fail. I mean, that's the ideal case, but you really want to build a system that never fails, because it, just like a human body, you subject it to stresses, it gets better.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for kicking us off, Partha. Um, Again, this conversation is going to cover a very wide variety of topics. So we're going to jump around slightly over to the RAN business unit now, a very fundamental part of what Rakuten Symphony brings to mobile network operators globally. So Anil, as president of the RAN business unit, there's a lot we can talk about today. There's been a lot of very exciting announcements recently, particularly last week, with the updates to our Real Open RAN licensing program, onboarding 3 new partners there. But maybe you can start off by giving some of your insight into what the BU is currently working on, and perhaps some of the things you're looking forward to in 2025.
Again, thank you for having me, and welcome to this session. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I think most of you know we commercially launched the first virtualized network back in 2018, 2019. Since then, we have matured both the 4G and 5G technologies in a commercial environment. I think we have heard from other speakers in terms of the scale of what we have done so far. So in the last 24 months, what we have been focusing on is to essentially figure out how do we accelerate the adoption of the O-RAN technology within the various different regions of the world. I think there are 2 or 3 areas where we focused on, and that led to licensing announcement last year. And I just want to cover where we are today. Fundamentally, one of the key things is to figure out how do we accelerate the radio ecosystem. There are many different bands that we need to support around the world and many different channel bandwidth, and each one of them has to have its own scale and its own uh, interoperability that we need to support. So one of the key things is by licensing our software, this is both the DU and the CU from a RAN perspective, we would enable the radio ecosystem developers to take advantage of it and then basically figure out how to make those products available to various different regions. The other areas that we are focusing on and essentially allowing people to use our software through whatever means they want to essentially deploy, that's also another area. And the way we are approaching that is we have a roadmap that we essentially develop the features. These are all both 3GPP standards, O-RAN standards, and as well as custom features. We make these things available in 2 releases per year. And one of the key things we do is we not only test in our commercial deployments, but also make the same software available through these licensing techniques so that they sort of get the access to the most hardened software that they can use and deploy. So those are some of the key initiatives, and the recent announcement that you all saw in the last few days is a first step towards engaging with the key partners in getting this thing going in another dimension.
And certainly that's a relatively disruptive model by industry standards, right? It's something that's certainly ahead of the curve and definitely reason to be excited at this point in time.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Anil, for getting us underway there with the RAN BU. Ryan, we're now going to shift over to you and the Internet Services business unit. I think most people, obviously, within the market consider Rakuten Symphony to be a telecom services provider, a telecom software company. But maybe some are perhaps not as familiar with the fact that we have lots of other technologies and services that go beyond telecom and expand into other industries. Can you give us a bit of background about the Internet Services business unit and the ways you're working with customers outside of telecom?
Of course. First of all, thank you for having us and welcome to our booth. As you know, Rakuten Symphony has been the leader in the Open RAN market for the past several years, and we launched. When we launched, can you hear me? Good. Okay. We launched the world's first 5G Open RAN network in the Japanese market. We did the same thing in Germany. So I believe if we keep doing what we have been doing so far, that might be enough for us to keep our position in the industry. That might be enough for us to help keep us thrive in the industry. But Rakuten, not only Rakuten Symphony, but Rakuten's group as a whole, we're not that kind of organization, right? We keep knocking on new doors. We keep challenging ourselves for new businesses and things like that. And I would like to say with modesty that Internet Services Business Unit is at the forefront of that efforts because we keep bringing in new businesses into the company. So for now, the products we build and sell and manage are basically internet services, right? So we have cloud storage service, and we have large data transfer service. We have IoT, CPaaS platform, and even we have maritime software. But what's really interesting about the ISBU Internet Services Business Unit is the fact that we keep bringing in new services and businesses into company. So what we do is, there are millions of excellent startups out there that provides great services and technology, but lack sales network and brand awareness and business development capabilities. So what we do is we keep looking out for those startups. We reach out to them and we propose our unique business structure, which is Rakuten, we white label their products and then we sell, we do the marketing and we do the sale and we share profit. And if you think about it, this is a perfectly balanced and the most fair division of labor because the both parties we only focus on what we are good at and we perfectly delegate what we're less good at to the other party. So in this picture, Rakuten is good at sales and marketing, and the startup they're good at services and products and technology. So we do the selling, marketing, and they will in charge. They will be in charge of the service and product. So in this business structure, we have launched Rakuten Neo, our IoT service. Now, Rakuten Neo is being used by many large corporations, and also is used by dozens of shared offices. So that's one. And we also recently launched Rakuten Maritime. Right, it's a maritime industry software, and it's now being really, really well received by the industry and the market. So here's what's really interesting about the ISBU, Internet Services Business Unit, is as I mentioned, we build and sell the services that are not limited to the telco industries or not directly related to the telco industry, but it can be our services can be provided to any enterprises or any corporations. And more importantly, we keep bringing in new services and businesses into Rakuten. That's the most unique part of the ISBU.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan. We'll move over to you now, Vivek. Firstly, welcome aboard. You joined Rakuten Symphony as the OSS BU president just a few weeks ago, so congratulations and welcome. I suppose with that in mind, it's a question of early impressions, first impressions, and what you've seen so far, and perhaps what you'd like to achieve going forward in whatever terms you'd like to put forward, really. Again, obviously, keep in mind you've only been here a few weeks.
Yeah, look, I have had the good fortune of meeting my own teams. That's where I started. I've got a lovely set of engineers, some great talent in India, in two places, in a tier one city like Bangalore and also in a tier two city, which is very interesting. And then I have a small team in Japan, which works quite closely with, obviously, with Rakuten Mobile. And I have to say, the first impression, I mean, a wonderful set of really talented engineers and some great IP, great set of products and work in progress products in the OSS space. So really, really delighted to kind of inherit that talent pool, and the potential is huge. I guess the second thing is we're also very pleasantly surprised with the customer base that we have. We have sold our products and licensed our service products to some really big telco customers around the world. And they're doing some very critical operations. And that's a great place to be in because not just Rakuten Mobile, but when you look at the diversity of customer base we have and the products that we have deployed there, it's firstly a huge responsibility on our shoulders for them because they have trusted us to help them in their goals and their journey. But it also gives us a massive amount of knowledge of because every telco is in their own um, point in the journey of transformation, going to a simplified network, simplified infrastructure, and the OSS that mirrors that infrastructure. They're all at different points, and for us to be able to be a partner in that journey is a very, very a nice place to be in. So again, something that I'm delighted, and it's great opportunity for us to be able to help and support them. And I guess so. I've also been to Japan. Is it 2 or 3 weeks? Been a lot of travel, lots of people I met. And I suppose one thing that really stands out in all this, is what's in the DNA of the company. And I think there is this huge entrepreneurial sort of mindset in the people that I've been working with and in my peer communities, which obviously comes from the top and kind of the history of where Rakuten is. And I'm seeing that in my own teams in the business unit, in the OSS unit, this this mindset of really trying to fix forward some really tough problems that we have in front of us and not looking to sort of escape out and do so. That desire to, be enterprising, be entrepreneurship, having entrepreneurial about it, and solve those customer problems, of which Rakuten Mobile is the toughest one, very high benchmark that they have set for us. But that ability to, that mindset that they have, that's really, really nice to see. And I think I see that in the DNA of the company, that entrepreneurial spirit, that problem solving. And I think that's refreshing. And so great talent, great set of customers, and that kind of entrepreneurial can-do spirit inside. I think we got a nice package there.
I believe the Shugi principle is always improve, always advance, actually. That's absolutely, I think that's very well summarized there. Completely agreed, Vivek. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
If we could pass it back to Partha, actually. So I think there's a degree of overlap here, Partha, of my next question in terms of some of the things Ryan has already talked about in terms of expanding beyond telecom and kind of, let's say, in some elements, expanding the Rakuten ecosystem and branching into other industries. But Rakuten Cloud's also a very interesting example of that in a lot of senses, right? So, I mean, you've worked with customers in retail, but in particular had quite a degree of success there. Also now looking to win doing some business in the private data center space as well. Can you talk about how Rakuten Cloud is industry agnostic, I suppose, and is not just fixed with telecom?
Sure. So when people when people hear the word cloud, the first thing that comes to mind is large data centers, and you have racks and racks of servers that are stacked in those data centers. Certainly, that's one type of cloud. And certainly, when you look at Rakuten Mobile, that's a model where you have very large data centers, especially on the central data centers part. But there's another type of cloud, which is essentially what we call as a distributed cloud. In the telco industry, you see that with baseband units, where essentially you have your the RAN BUs software running next to the radios, and the same concept of taking compute and then distributing that across tens and thousands of different locations also exists outside of telco. You mentioned retail. So we have the world's largest fast food chain as our customer. And what they're doing is essentially putting these servers in each of their fast food chain. And on those servers, they're essentially running, of course, the point of sale system, the inventory management systems that gives them, the ability to store that and run it locally, disconnected from their mothership, if you will. But they can also now use that same footprint to run things like video analytics for security, right? You essentially have these cameras that are capturing things, and you don't want to send that to a central cloud. You want to capture that local to the store itself. But you also want to use the same video analytic, the same cameras to figure out who is coming into the store. And once you see who is coming into the store, you can essentially create a profile of what they have been buying and then recommend other things. So essentially, you improve the experience that a customer has when they come in. And now you can take that one step further and say that, okay, now we have all this information. Can you essentially run analytics right in the store so that you can essentially increase the revenue that this retailer can get on a per customer visit basis? So the way we have built our cloud is that it works in these very large data centers where you have, centralized compute, storage, and networking. And at the same time, it works at the same level of agility and efficiency and performance in a distributed form, where you're essentially running it across tens and thousands of locations, where you have smaller set of servers spread across, very wide geography.
If we can briefly link that back to telecom, though, and how we can apply those same principles, maybe we can talk about how some of the things you've mentioned there can also benefit mobile network operators. How can they integrate this into their operation, and what kind of outcomes can they expect?
Yeah. So a few things here, right? Once you have a distributed cloud, which is essentially, like, just going back to the definition, fewer number of servers spread across tens and thousands of different locations. Now, you have to manage that. It's not like you send a human being to go manage all these things, right? You essentially build an infrastructure orchestration platform that can allow you to manage all these different things. Components fail all the time. How do you essentially ensure that applications restart on healthier components or healthier servers? So all of those learnings can cross-pollinate, and it can also work for the telco use cases as well, because as I said, telco also has this RAN use case, which is again distributed in nature, right? And whatever we learn in telco, we can push it back to the edge as well. Like, for example, telco is very performance sensitive, right? You have these latency thresholds that you want to meet. And some of these analytical workloads are also performance sensitive, not from a latency perspective, but you have a fewer or lesser amount of compute in these edge locations, and you got to squeeze out the best possible performance out of that without tanking the performance of the other things like point of sale or inventory management and things like that. So it kind of cross-pollinates, and we can really benefit from having both these use cases solved by one common platform.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Partha. And Neil, if we can go back to you, I think what's certainly a very interesting value proposition is, again, as one of the world's perhaps the world's largest advocates of Open RAN, is how when we can overlap these products and services that we've talked about here, what kind of value can that deliver to a mobile network operator? Speaking as someone from a RAN perspective, when you have the cloud RAN, fully virtualized RAN, what kind of benefits can be delivered there, and what's your perspective on that?
That's a great question. One specific area, if I take the next 12 to 18 month view, one specific area that's going to be of importance is AI and ML driven automation. There's some things that we have already implemented from an automation perspective, and this has a significant impact on the overall OpEx, more importantly than the CapEx. And this is an area where we essentially have to really focus on and see how things evolve and how we iterate on it. That basically leads to a solution integration that cuts across all of the capabilities that have to be developed, whether it be in the RAN, whether it be in the cloud, or whether it be in the OSS. So one of the key initiatives that we have already started and we need to accelerate on is what are some of these AI ML driven automation that we need to take into account. Two specific areas which we are already doing, but based on the input from the field, we need to improvise on it. One is the lifecycle management of these workloads that Partha referred to. And then the second one is a real-time optimization for performance of the network, which are the important factors, which is currently done manually, and there's a huge operations team that does that for the various different operators. So this is essentially an area where we need to focus on. And the fortunate part is everybody is at the same starting point, including the competitors. So I think this is an area for us to focus on for sure.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If we could pass back to you, Vivek. So you've talked about some of the really exciting talent that you've already seen within the OSS BU and the potential that lies ahead, I suppose. Again, very early days for your tenure at the company, but can you talk about some of the things that you could maybe envisage us launching perhaps at some point? Any without going into too many details, of course, but what do you think is the kind of product roadmap and things that you would like to introduce going forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously early days in terms of being able to be definitive from my personal perspective. But I think one of the things that, when you look at the OSS landscape for the telco world, right, there are two worlds. There's one world which I think we have in Rakuten Mobile, which is because of a different path they took. The infrastructure, the networks is relatively simpler. And the OSS usually mirrors that in the network infrastructure. The OSS is therefore relatively simpler. And you got a whole bunch of other brownfield telcos who have obviously got all that history and then built all that technical debt. And with all that's happened there in the infrastructure and the evolution, the OSS has also become a very complex beast for most all these telcos. And what I mean by complex is it's basically a number of systems and applications all talking to each other with interfaces, and lots of pockets of data, copying of data in every lot of places. And so you got all this mix, and then when companies acquire other companies, it just becomes more complexity. And then some networks start to go into virtual worlds, so you introduce clouds, and then it gets even more complex when actually the intent is to go reverse. So you got all that stuff going on in the brownfield world, and all that complexity is mirrored in the OSS. Lots of these islands, as I say. So one of the things that we are trying to do is, firstly, in our own world, in the kind of for Rakuten Mobile, we are trying to create this OSS world, which is highly simplified, a set of platforms and a bunch of products within those platforms, but essentially use case driven. and more fundamentally driven by a big data and a AI layer in between, right? Which basically goes straight to the network and pulls all that data, and based on the intent, we basically orchestrate that, not just for planning and so on, but also for care and in life. Um, and I think that's the world that we see for the OSS world: highly simplified, very intent driven, data and AI driven. That's what we are building. And I think we can do that and build that for our customers as well. And that's what our roadmap should mirror, is that world where we are, bringing those products to bear for our customers, which are highly data driven, highly AI driven. Um, but we know where they are, like I said earlier, that complex world. And therefore, our responsibility is to show how the baby steps that they can take to move from this current state of complexity to that kind of end state, the simple world of OSS and infrastructure beneath that. So I think that's where our efforts are going to be. I mean, no beans done. We need to build that sort of roadmap to help our customers handle them where we can, and where we are already entrenched, or in certain places where they see value in the products we have, and take them to that, what I call the brave new world of a highly simplified data and AI driven OSS. That's kind of what our roadmap is going to look like. We have to do some work on that, but we've got great building blocks already to bring that together.
Absolutely. And on that note, at 4 o'clock, I believe, there's actually a couple of related launches relating to the OSS portfolio. Some very exciting stuff that we can expect coming out today. Thank you very much. We'll round off the conversation with you, Ryan. So you touched upon Rakuten Maritime before. It's a very interesting example of how Rakuten Symphony is certainly successfully branching out beyond telecom. Can you tell us a bit more about that partnership and exactly how we've gone into the maritime industry with technology?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, Rakuten Symphony ISBU, we're now building internet services, cloud storage service, large data transfer service, IoT, and whatnot. And now we're making a bold step into one of the largest and most critical industries in the world, maritime industry. And this is not just a expansion of our business, but rather a strategic move towards the very industry that powers global economy, global trade, and global connectivity. Right? When we think about ships and vessels, it's no longer conventional. Right? We're living in the era of smart ships and even autonomous ships. And over the last several years, we have witnessed multiple major cyber attacks in the maritime industry. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a major ransomware attack against the biggest port in Japan, Nagoya port. And several years before that, we have seen a major cyber attack against the biggest ship lines in the world, Maersk from Denmark, which caused enormous financial and economical damage. And in with this global trend and with the rise of this cyber attacks in the maritime industry, the global organizations in the maritime industry, say IACS, International Association of Classification Society, together with United Nations IMO, International Maritime Organization, they very recently updated decades-long maritime regulation, namely E26 and E27. And according to these new regulations, all the ships and vessels that will be built from July 2024, last year, must be equipped with cybersecurity measures. Otherwise, you won't be able to operate in the sea. And with all this trend, with all this movement from the global organizations, Internet Services BU, we were convinced that it is high time that we did something, some business in this market, right? So that's when we started actively looking out for startups with cybersecurity, maritime cybersecurity software, and we were able to find a couple of them from many different countries, but we were able to find this one company, like awesome, with the awesome the founder CEO, and with really great products from Korea. And we approached them. We proposed our unique business structure. So we launched Rakuten. That's how we launched Rakuten Maritime. And some interesting use cases or scenes of our Rakuten Maritime product is, for example, let's say, James, you're the captain of a tanker ship, right? You're in the North Sea, right? And let's say a few kilometers away from your ship, like let's say 10 kilometers away, this ship is under attack, under cyber attack. For now, there is no way for you to know what's going on in the ship, right? So you might as well be the next target. But in Rakuten Maritime, we have this specific product called Cyber Threat Intelligence. So what it does is it will tell you what's going on nearby your ship, and as well as all around the world, what's going on real time, so that you can be prepared or you can escape from that scene. So that's one thing. And another interesting product is we have a product called Ship Honeypot. So what it is let's say even with all these preparations and with all these measures, your ship is now under attack, right? You got to do something. Then what we do is we will create a decoy ship. We will create a virtual ship, and we will make the attacker believe that this is the real ship, not the actual ship. So that the attacker will start attacking this ship while we buy time, and we will even analyze what the attack behavior and then things like that. And then we will be able to respond to the attack real time. So these there are many other features and products in Rakuten Maritime cybersecurity, and Rakuten Maritime is not only about cybersecurity. It's actually we're creating a one-stop or all-in-one solution for the maritime industry. So we're consolidating already existing Rakuten services with a new service. For example, so what we do is, smart ships, autonomous ships, they will be generating enormous amount of data, right? The ships and vessels will absolutely need cloud storage and large data transfer, right? And in ISBU, we have Send Anywhere, we have Rakuten Drive, and smart ships they'll definitely need IoT service for security reasons and safety and to meet the basic needs of a ship. We have Rakuten Neo IoT service, and in smart ships, all the applications and software will run on the cloud, and we have Partha as a product. The ships will need edge cloud computing so that they can better manage and deploy their applications and software on the cloud in the open sea. Not only that, we have we have Rakuten Mobile. Soon they'll be providing satellite-based mobile network, and we're going to provide this as one of the Rakuten Maritime features. And lastly, we have cybersecurity software. So, yeah, we have been working on the internet services in general, but now we're making inroads into this very interesting and large industry, maritime industry. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I mean, that brings us to the end of the discussion, but just a couple of closing thoughts. I think it's certainly great to see and hear your story about Rakuten Maritime. I think that's a fantastic opportunity and showcase of the Rakuten entrepreneurial spirit. As you say, it's something that is branching out beyond telecom, but like you say, you saw changes in international in industry regulations. You develop products and services that could serve a need, and that's now being brought to market. That's fantastic. Once again, Vivek, congratulations on your appointment, and certainly it's great to hear your kind of plan for the near term for the OSS BU. Partha, thank you very much for sharing just how Rakuten Cloud is working and helping other industries beyond telecom. Again, that's fantastic. And Anil, thank you very much for showing or discussing just how AI is going to underpin what the RAN BU is doing going forward. Ladies and gents, a big round of applause for the presidents of Rakuten Symphony's business units. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you all very much to our panelists. It's been a pleasure hosting you.